It began beneath stone and ice. Inside the granite ribs of the Harz Mountains, a tunnel curved downward through dim amber light. Drops of condensed water fell from the ceiling, striking the concrete with a rhythm that mingled with the slow hum of buried machines. At 3:41 hours, on July 8th, 1943, every lamp inside Versatschanlage E17 flickered once, then steadied. The air was cold enough to turn breath into pale vapor. A generator somewhere deep in the corridor throbbed unevenly, its cadence muffled by layers of reinforced steel. Beyond the final pressure door, a chamber the size of a small auditorium glowed faintly blue. The floor was wet, the walls blackened by graphite dust. Coils wound with copper, the width of a man's arm, encircled a cylindrical core suspended from a web of polished struts. Instruments lined the walls: oscillographs, resonance counters, vacuum gauges, each marked with the eagle crest of the Reichspostministerium. A faint ozone scent filled the air. The tungsten lamps overhead burned with a dry metallic hiss. Static electricity prickled against the skin. Technicians in gray coveralls moved slowly, checking dials through glass, noting readings with pencils sharpened to needles. The temperature hovered at 2 degrees above freezing. Condensation clung to the inside of the viewport glass, distorting the light into trembling halos. At the far end of the room, a rectangular device sat on a low pedestal, matte, cylindrical, capped at both ends by concentric rings of beryllium bronze. Thick conduits fed into its core from transformers sunk into the concrete floor. A faint vibration passed through the air whenever the field coils cycled. Instruments recorded a background oscillation far below audible frequency, something like the pulse of the earth itself. In the center of the chamber, a man in a dark overcoat leaned close to the main control console. His face was pale, drawn, illuminated by the shifting reflections of the gauges. The hands of the clock above the central panel read 3:52. Outside the walls of the mountain, dawn had not yet reached the valley of Blankenberg. Within the mountain, there was only the hum of power being gathered. For months, the installation had remained invisible to reconnaissance. The entrances masked as ore storage facilities, the ventilation shafts hidden under forest canopies. Officially, the site was designated as an extension of the Heeresversatsanstalt, Peenemünde, but few of those who worked there ever visited the Baltic coast. They belonged instead to a splinter unit of the SS Forschungsgemeinschaft, Ahnenerbe, attached nominally to the Reichspost technical branch. Its purpose was not missile propulsion or radar. It was resonance physics, an attempt to manipulate the frequency behavior of matter, and, according to certain documents, the temporal field in which matter existed. The project's internal name was Sonderversuch Chronos. To the men who constructed its central device, it was simply the Chronos engine. Its conception could be traced to late 1941, when theoretical discussions at Göttingen and Leipzig began to touch upon anomalies in electromagnetic delay during high-energy discharge experiments. Certain physicists, among them Dr. Ernst von Kahl and a small group of engineers previously employed by Siemens Schuckert, had observed that, under conditions of synchronized magnetic inversion, minute distortions occurred in the propagation of light pulses across closely spaced fields. The deviation measured only microseconds, but was consistent. The hypothesis emerged that within a sufficiently strong, resonant environment, localized time differentials might be induced. Not time travel, in the popular sense, but temporal compression, a region in which physical processes slowed or halted relative to an external observer. The implications were military. If a field could be projected that froze mechanical motion or neutralized explosive reaction for even fractions of a second, it could alter the outcome of any engagement. Funding was immediate. By 1942, as the Eastern Front devoured men and resources, the Reichspostministerium and the SS Technical branch redirected certain research allocations from abandoned microwave projects toward von Kahl's group. A secure underground site was requisitioned near Blankenberg, beneath what had been a disused slate mine. The facility was constructed by Organization Tot with forced labor drawn from Mittelbau-Dora. By the winter of 1942–43, Versuchsanlage E-17 was operational. It housed the principal apparatus, 3 concentric rings of superconductive coils cooled by liquid nitrogen, a pulse generator derived from captured Norwegian heavy water reactor components, and a quartz-regulated control system designed to synchronize oscillations at precisely 14,320 cycles per second. Within the innermost ring, suspended on magnetic bearings, lay the reaction core, a composite of tungsten and beryllium, shaped into a cylinder 1 meter long. At its axis, a cavity containing an amalgam of mercury, thorium oxide, and silver powder spun at high velocity under electromagnetic torque. Contemporary reports describe the theory succinctly. The Chronos engine was not intended to travel through time, but to alter its rate locally by generating a counter-resonant field that would oppose the phase progression of matter. In practical terms, it was an attempt to create a momentary temporal inertia, a static bubble in which causality itself hesitated. To maintain secrecy, components were manufactured across multiple facilities: the coils at Siemens in Berlin, the cryogenic vessels at AEG in Chemnitz, and the frequency modulators at Telefunken in Breslau. Assembly occurred inside E-17 under constant SS supervision. No more than 20 personnel held full clearance. Every document bore the classification Geheime Kommandosek, Sonderprojekt Chronos, Group Kammler. Throughout the spring of 1943, low power tests were conducted. Field intensities increased gradually, revealing strange phenomena. Clocks near the reaction chamber began to desynchronize. A pendulum placed inside the containment cell exhibited irregular motion. At field strengths above 40% nominal, photographic plates exposed, through narrow slits, recorded faint streaks of light curvature. Some technicians reported a sensation of pressure in the inner ear, as if altitude had abruptly changed. One suffered mild disorientation, lasting several hours. Von Kahl interpreted these as signs that the phase field was forming. He calculated that if the oscillation harmonics could be stabilized at triple resonance, a transient temporal lock might be achieved, a freezing of local atomic vibration measurable in real time. To demonstrate the effect, he proposed a full power test scheduled for early July. The date selected was the night of the 8th, during low geomagnetic activity. By then, the war was reaching its turning point. Allied bombing raids were intensifying. Peenemünde was preparing to disperse its rocket production. The leadership demanded results, from every advanced program, regardless of risk. Under SS oversight, Kammler's office authorized the full test. An observer from Berlin, an engineer from the Reichspost's Central Physics Department, was dispatched to witness the event. His identity remains uncertain. Post-war files refer only to an Oberingenieur H. In preparation, the Chronos chamber was sealed. Auxiliary generators were synchronized to the main grid, drawing power from a hydroelectric installation 20 kilometers away. Coolant lines were flushed. Mercury rotation speeds were increased to nominal 12,000 revolutions per minute. The containment shell was evacuated to near vacuum. Instrumentation was calibrated using quartz clocks, accurate to 1/10,000th of a second. On the morning of July 7, all readings stabilized within tolerance. The following night, as the technicians assembled in the control gallery, the atmosphere inside the mountain was heavy with the scent of oil and cold metal. Outside, thunderheads gathered over the valley. Within the concrete corridors, cables snaked like veins along the walls, carrying current from the transformers below. The sound of the turbines deepened as load increased. Every oscillograph trace brightened to a narrow white line. According to subsequent summaries, the initial charge sequence began at 3:37. The magnetic confinement field reached 60% by 3:49. Inside the chamber, the mercury core glowed faintly, emitting a diffuse violet light attributed to ionization. Pressure sensors recorded minor fluctuations, and for brief intervals the air temperature near the containment window dropped sharply, sometimes by as much as 4 degrees in a single second. The experiment log, later recovered in fragments, describes the next phase as synchronization of temporal gradient. To achieve resonance, von Kahl adjusted the modulation frequency in increments of 1/10th cycle. Each adjustment altered the acoustic resonance of the chamber, producing a low, throbbing tone that reverberated through the mountain. The technicians called it the heartbeat. By 3:51, the dials stabilized. The output indicators glowed steady red. The observers noted a faint luminescence extending beyond the reaction core, a shimmering sphere that distorted reflections on the glass. The magnetic flux intensity reached the planned 100%. The final control lever was secured. Everything that had been theoretical for 2 years now converged into a single instant of test. For a moment, the facility seemed to pause. Even the generator rhythm steadied into a perfect tone. Instruments continued to record. Pens scratched across chart paper with mechanical precision. The air pressure equalized. Beyond the glass, the sphere of light contracted slightly, its edge sharpening into a thin halo. The clock on the central panel marked 3:52:11. What followed has remained the subject of debate for decades. Documents recovered from the archives at Blankenberg in 1946 describe a transient blackout of all electrical systems lasting approximately 12 seconds. During this period, no oscillograph recorded data, no sound was detected, and even the mechanical stopwatch placed in the control room showed an unaccountable discontinuity. The technicians later testified that their perception of the event was not of darkness or silence, but of absence, as if the world itself had ceased to progress. Yet in the seconds leading up to that interruption, before time stilled, every element in the mountain facility had aligned precisely for the first and only activation of the Chronos engine. The resonance field was stable. The containment coils pulsed at perfect phase. The cryogenic flow maintained temperature. Instruments captured the last coherent readings, magnetic flux density exceeding expected thresholds. By 12%, field harmonics producing interference patterns unknown to standard theory. An internal microphone recorded a faint harmonic rising beyond audible frequency, then cutting abruptly to zero. The observers had no warning. One described a sensation of vertigo, as if falling inward. Another reported that the glow from the reaction core expanded silently until it filled the chamber. There was no explosion, no heat, no sound, only an overwhelming stillness. Then, nothing. The chronometers stopped. The paper on the oscillographs remained half-drawn across the rollers. A droplet of condensation hung motionless in the air near the containment window, perfectly spherical, neither falling nor evaporating. In that condition, unmoving, unchanging, the facility existed for 12 seconds of recorded time. For 12 measurable seconds, nothing within Versailles E17 moved. The mercury stream inside the reaction core froze mid-spin, its surface forming a rigid spiral like a cast of light turned solid. Air molecules suspended in crystalline stillness. Electric charge ceased to flow. Even the quartz oscillators of the clocks halted, their vibrations caught between cycles. Beyond the laboratory's concrete walls, the forest above the Harz Mountains lay untouched, unaware. Yet deep within the mountain, every process, from the flicker of tungsten filaments to the faint pulse in human arteries, existed in perfect immobility. Then, without transition, time resumed. The lights returned with a brittle snap. Instruments jerked forward, their recording pens tearing the paper. Steam vented from the coolant lines. A wave of heat rolled through the chamber, followed by the sharp scent of ozone and burned insulation. The resonance coils buckled slightly under sudden stress. Metal creaked, as if exhaling. One technician collapsed. Another vomited against the console. Watches everywhere read the same missing interval. 12 seconds unaccounted for. The Chronos engine was silent. Its glow had vanished. The core hung inert, its bearings motionless. The containment window was coated with a thin film of frost that melted slowly, revealing the object within, no longer spinning, no longer metallic. Its surface now dull gray, faintly granular, as if the inner structure had been altered at the molecular level. Von Kahl ordered an immediate power cutoff. The auxiliary circuits were isolated. The chamber vented. Measurements taken afterward revealed no radiation, no chemical change except an unexplained increase in mass of approximately 0.2%. Clocks synchronized against external references showed that the interruption had indeed lasted 12 seconds, though. Every device inside the facility, including those powered by independent batteries, recorded no passage of time at all. Subsequent analysis struggled to explain the anomaly. The primary theory held that the resonance field had entered a phase inversion, generating what the engineers termed a temporal null interval, a moment in which the local time constant approached infinity, halting physical processes. Energy consumed during this state was unaccounted for, as if absorbed into an unobservable domain. The test was declared both a success and a failure. Success, because it had demonstrated measurable temporal displacement. Failure, because control was lost the instant the field stabilized. The Chronos engine could not be restarted. Attempts to energize the coils again produced only erratic pulses and magnetic noise. The mercury core remained altered, unresponsive to torque. For 48 hours, the mountain installation remained sealed while the team compiled data. Each man was required to write an account under oath. Their statements, later discovered among the Kamla archives, reveal consistent details. Every witness reported an identical subjective experience. The moment of the field's collapse seemed simultaneous with its initiation. None perceived the 12-second gap. To them, the event occurred instantaneously, yet instruments proved otherwise. One report described an uncanny silence, not merely absence of sound, but absence of potential sound, as if the medium for vibration no longer existed. Another noted that the color of the light before the blackout shifted toward ultraviolet, giving objects a faint luminescent outline. When the effect ended, the light returned normal but seemed colder, flatter, as if the spectrum itself had been fractionally displaced. Von Kahl's own notes, later recovered from a sealed locker, show growing unease. He wrote that the experiment had interfered with the substrate of duration, and that further activation might detach the field from causal reference entirely. His language became increasingly cautious, even fearful. On July 10, he ordered the apparatus dismantled and stored pending directives from Berlin. 2 days later, an SS courier arrived with sealed orders from Kamla himself. The entire installation was to be evacuated, records microfilmed, and all personnel reassigned. The Chronos core was to be transported to an undisclosed location in Silesia. By mid-July, the tunnels at Blankenberg stood empty. Power cables were removed, transformers shut down. The equipment was crated under supervision of SS Sturmbannführer Eberhardt and loaded onto rail wagons bound east. Officially, Versuchanlage E-17 ceased to exist. In the Reich's registries, it was listed as an abandoned radar research station. Within weeks, the Allied air offensive intensified. Peenemünde was bombed in August, forcing the relocation of rocket production underground. The documentation of Sonder Project Chronos passed into Kamla's expanding network of secret facilities, among them Mittelwerk and a rumored site near Breslau known only as Schacht D. After that, the trail darkened. No further mention of the Chronos engine appears in wartime correspondence. Von Kahl himself disappeared in early 1945 while traveling from Prague toward the Alps. Some claim he was killed during an air raid. Others suggest he was taken into American custody under Operation Paperclip. The truth remains uncertain. In the post-war years, fragments of the project resurfaced in scattered archives. In 1946, Allied technical investigators under the Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee examined the Blankenberg site. They found collapsed tunnels, remnants of high-capacity wiring, and a chamber partly filled with water. Among the debris lay sheets of melted glass fused into the concrete floor. Metallurgical analysis revealed microscopic lattice distortions, inconsistent with thermal damage. When exposed to low-temperature magnetic fields, the samples exhibited anomalous behavior, minor shifts in resonance frequency, as if internal structure retained a memory of the original field. The report, classified at the time, noted possible evidence of field-induced temporal stress. It was archived and forgotten until declassification decades later. Parallel inquiries traced the missing equipment. Freight logs indicated a transport from Blankenberg to Silesia in July 1943, but the destination station, marked only as B2, could not be identified. Some historians believe it referred to a sub-facility of Project Reese, the vast underground complex near Wallem. Polish miners who explored those tunnels in the 1950s reported encountering sealed steel doors and sections of vitrified rock. Radiation tests showed nothing abnormal, but magnetometers registered localized anomalies, brief spikes that vanished when approached. If the Chronos core was hidden there, it was never recovered. A few surviving scientists from the wartime Reichspost laboratories later spoke of the experiment in cautious terms. Interviewed anonymously in 1961, described hearing rumors of a time compression experiment conducted under Kammler's authority, using magnetic resonance derived from radio frequency modulation research. He denied direct involvement, but admitted that after 1943 certain technical requests from Berlin referenced phase stability across the temporal axis. Such language, he said, did not belong to conventional physics. Decades of investigation have yielded only fragments, partial schematics, faded photographs, log pages recording current and temperature, marginal notes in cramped handwriting. Yet the consistency of detail across sources suggests that something extraordinary was attempted. To reconstruct the possible mechanism, modern analysts have revisited the surviving data. The Chronos engine appears to have operated as a triaxial magnetic resonance system. 3 rings of superconducting coils generated rotating fields offset by 90 degrees. Within the central core, the mercury-thorium mixture acted as a dynamic reflector, converting electromagnetic energy into mechanical torsion at high frequency. When phase alignment reached harmonic coincidence, the overlapping fields could theoretically produce an area of extreme spacetime curvature on microscopic scale, a localized gravitational anomaly. Ordinarily, such an effect would be negligible, but calculations indicate that, under the immense magnetic flux achieved on July 8, 1943, estimated at over 10 million Gauss, the distortion could have been sufficient to influence the rate of time itself within the containment volume. The field may have acted like a lens, bending not light but temporal flow, compressing duration to 0 for all matter within its reach. This interpretation aligns with the recorded 12-second blackout. From outside observers' perspective, time halted. From within, the same 12 seconds did not exist. When the field collapsed, continuity resumed, leaving only a mass, discrepancy, and an altered crystalline pattern as physical residue. If accurate, the Chronos engine was the first human experiment to interfere with time's passage, albeit unintentionally. Yet, the event never repeated. Attempts to replicate it after the war, even using advanced superconductors and magnetic confinement, failed to reproduce the anomaly. Some physicists argue that unknown parameters, geomagnetic conditions, field symmetry, material impurities, may have contributed to a unique resonance impossible to duplicate. Others suspect the reports were misinterpretations of an electrical failure combined with collective trauma. Still, the data resist conventional dismissal. 12 seconds remain missing from every synchronized record. In 1958, a classified memorandum within the United States Army Signal Corps referenced unexplained German research concerning chronometric field interference and requested retrieval of surviving documentation. That same year, a small team examined confiscated SS papers stored in Fort Detrick, Maryland. Among them lay a single film reel labeled Versuch E17, 8.743. The reel contained only 6 meters of damaged 16 mm film showing an empty laboratory, then a sudden glare of light, then static. The frame numbering suggested 12 seconds of missing footage. Whether coincidence or trace evidence, the film became the final known artifact of the Chronos experiment. Back in Germany, the abandoned tunnels at Blankenberg were sealed by local authorities in 1964 after repeated collapses. In 1997, spelunkers rediscovered a deeper chamber, not recorded on any map. Inside, they found rusted scaffolding, corroded cable mounts, and a circular depression in the floor resembling a foundation ring. Embedded in the concrete was a faint metallic residue arranged in concentric patterns. When samples were analyzed, traces of beryllium, bronze, and mercury were confirmed. Magnetometric scans revealed residual alignment consistent with a massive electromagnetic structure once anchored there. The discovery reignited speculation that the Chronos engine had indeed been assembled and tested exactly as described in the wartime logs. Historians debated its purpose: an early particle experiment, a failed weapon, or an attempt at controlled temporal distortion. Yet the documents remain incomplete, and the technology itself vanished. The psychological dimension is harder to measure. Survivors from auxiliary units recalled odd stories: watches that stopped for minutes, shadows that seemed misaligned with their sources, a feeling of days blending together around that time. None could be proven, yet all circle the same date, July 8th, 1943. Modern physics regards time dilation as real but minute, measurable only, at velocities approaching light or in intense gravitational fields. But the engineers of Sonder Project Chronos worked without such knowledge. Their approach was empirical, rooted in resonance and field harmonics. It is conceivable that through unplanned interactions of magnetic torsion, rotational mercury plasma, and cryogenic oscillation, they created a local condition resembling a singularity, too small to observe, too brief to sustain, but enough to arrest the flow of time in a confined space. The danger was evident. Such a field, if extended beyond laboratory scale, could immobilize entire structures or annihilate them by collapsing the continuity that binds atomic motion. Perhaps Kamler recognized this when he ordered the project sealed. Perhaps he intended to weaponize it elsewhere. No one knows. The disappearance of the Chronos core after July 1943 remains unresolved. Allied archives show no record of its capture. Soviet files, declassified after 1991, mention an unknown magnetic head device recovered near Walim in 1945, but provide no photographs. If the core still existed, it may have been dismantled, buried, or lost among the chaos of surrender. Today, the story of the Chronos engine survives only through fragments of testimony and the enduring gap of 12 seconds recorded in instruments 75 meters below the surface of the Harz. In that mountain silence, power gathered, light condensed, and for an hour, interval too brief to perceive, the continuity of the world faltered. The hum ceased, the pendulum froze, the droplet of water remained suspended between fall and vapor. Somewhere within that frozen instant lay the culmination of human ambition, to command not space or matter, but the rhythm of existence itself. The documents end abruptly. The final entry in the experiment log reads only, field collapse, 3:52:23. Power loss, core unresponsive. Below it, in smaller handwriting, a single word, Ruhi, silence. No trace of the device has ever been found. The tunnels have flooded, the records scattered. Only the date remains, etched into classified reports and recollections, July 8th, 1943. According to every clock outside the mountain, 12 seconds passed between 3:52:11 and 3:52:23. Inside, there was no interval at all, and deep beneath the stone, in that narrow seam between seconds, the resonance may still linger, an echo of the Chronos engine, holding its perfect stillness, waiting for time to begin again.